In this tutorial, we're going to use the Coinstr CLI to create a multi-sig policy, a 2 of 2 policy from the perspective of Frank. The other user that we have is Gary. But Frank's going to create the policy, review the policy. We're going to fund the policy from the Bitcoin testnet. We're going to create a spend proposal on the policy. Then both Frank and Gary will approve the proposal, and then Gary will broadcast the transaction. This tutorial is located at ndkit.com/tutorials/Coinstr-CLI. Tutorials on the left-hand side of the screen. On the right-hand side of the screen, I have at the top the relay log, which is you're just gonna see some scrolling by when we're connecting to it. It's just as a visual indicator that we're saving messages to Nostr. And in the main screen, the bottom right-hand corner here, we have our terminal where we're going to be entering commands, mostly copying, pasting commands from the tutorial. All right, let's get started. So the first thing you have to do, if you haven't done it already, is install Rust. So there's instructions here on how to install that. If you haven't done that, pause the video, install Rust. Also, if you haven't already, build Coinstr. Just clone the repo and run cargo build -- release. If you haven't done that already, pause the video and do that. All right, I've already done all of that, so I'm just going to jump right in. And we're going to create brand new keys from scratch to create our policy. And so there are a couple parameters that are needed for the Coinstr CLI. Well, the command is generate. To generate a new account, and we're going to have a password. The password is used to encrypt the local data that we're saving. So it's going to create a mnemonic and an optional passphrase, and it's going to use the password to encrypt that, and that's a required value. The passphrase, on the other hand, is the value that gets applied to the mnemonic to adjust the keys, and that's optional. So what we're going to do is just pass in an empty string for the passphrase, and then the final parameter here is the name of the keychain that we're creating. So we're just going to generate a net new one for Frank. It'll print the mnemonic. It's just a test, so you don't have to worry about writing it down. But in real world, you would, of course, write that down and save it someplace safe. So let's create another one for Gary. Great. And now in both of these cases, like I said, we have not used a passphrase, and we've used the password 12344. So let's inspect the keys as the next step. And what we can do is use an environment variable, Coinstr password, and we're going to set that to 1234. Then we'll call the CLI. We'll inspect them for the testnet, and then we just pass in the name of the keychain that we want to inspect. So just to look at that again, we've got the environment variable 1234, the name of our executable, network testnet, and we want to inspect Frank. And so this does create quite a bit of data here for us. It's a little bit wrapped funny because I'm zoomed in quite a bit with this font. But at the top, you'll see the mnemonic, you'll see the passphrase, which of course is blank. Then you'll see information about the Nostr keys. The Nostr keys have both a hex public-private version and a Bech32 public-private version. The difference between those two is really not important for this tutorial. And then below, you see that there's a Bitcoin section. This uses the same mnemonic and the same passphrase to generate a number of different Bitcoin derived values, from the root private key to an extended public key, output descriptor, different receiving addresses that we could use for this account. We're going to use this public value. And so I'm just going to copy that. We're going to use that in our output descriptor, the hex public. So what you should do is just copy that and paste it in, say, TextPad. And then we have, that's Frank. So let's do the same thing for Gary. And now Gary has a completely different mnemonic and set of keys. We're going to copy also the hex public key for here. And so what we'll do is, I'm just going to show you that this is the same. We're going to copy this private key for Gary. And over on the left-hand side, I'm going to log into Hamster, which is just a client, Nostr client. And so I'm just going to go to add an account, log in with the key. You know what? I'm supposed to copy the Beck32 private key for Hamster. This one's the one that begins in SEC. So I'm going to copy that and paste that here and log in. Now this is a brand new account. I've never logged into Nostr with it before, so of course there's nothing here. But just to prove that I can actually post, we'll just say my name is Gary. We saw that we inserted an event up here, if you're paying attention. And of course we have my name is Gary. There, and inserted another event. So it's a normal Nostr account. Okay, so now let's create our multi-signature policy, which we're going to create using a mini script format. So if you look here on the left-hand side, the format that we're going to use is the threshold, the word thresh, followed by an open paren 2 for the number of 2. That's the number of approvals we're looking for in this particular policy. And then the prospective signers for this policy are Frank's public key and Gary's public key. And so what we're going to do is just construct this on the terminal based off of the hex public keys, the Nostr public keys that we copied from inspecting Gary and Frank's keys. And it'll look something like this. The keys will be different than what you see in the tutorial because we just generated them, but it will look similar. So before we construct that, let's talk a little bit about this this step and the different parameters. So at the top, we're going to set the environment variable to 1, 2, 3, 4. That's just going to be what we need to unlock the keychain. We're going to call the Coinstr CLI. Then we're going to say save policy, save it to Frank's notes on Nostr. This is going to save that policy to Frank's Nostr account on the relay that we have shown at the top right. There's going to be a title for this policy or a name for the policy, multisig 2 of 2. There's a description. And we're just using testing multisig as part of the Coinstr CLI tutorial. And then that's followed by the output descriptor, or the mini script, I'm sorry. the one that we just talked about. So what we'll do is we'll copy all of that and we'll paste that into our terminal. But I'm going to get rid of the two keys, and I'm going to copy from our text pad. I'm going to copy in, let's see, this one is Gary's, and then in here I'm going to put Frank's, the other one. So got our password, save policy to Frank's notes, the name, description, and the policy itself. Great. We should have gotten an insert up here. Yep. We have saved that as an event. And now let's take a look at Frank's policies. This command is similar. We're going to use, again, the environment variable, Coinstr password, set it to 1234, Coinstr CLI, get policies for Frank. Okay, it's a little jumbled up here, like I said. But here we have the ID, followed by, this is the event ID of this note, followed by the name, multisig 2 of 2, followed by the description that we set, testing multisig as part of the Coinstr CLI tutorial. If the screen, if it weren't so bungled up down here, it would look more like this on the left-hand side. You'll see that it's a nice table. So as you run this on your own, you'll get a much nicely formatted output. So that's the table view. And so as we created more policies, it would add records to that table, reviewing all of those notes. Which a policy is a particular event kind. It hasn't been written up in a NIP, but it's a particular kind that our tooling knows about. But so for our next step, we'll just take the same. Let's first copy what's over here on the left, which is our get policy command. Which is just going to dive into that one from that list. I'm going to copy and paste the policy ID. Okay. So this creates a good amount of output. Starting here with the word policy, we have first our ID, which is the same value that we pass to the command. We have some of these that we already talked about, the name, multisig 2 of 2, the description, testing multisig. And then we have our descriptor, our policy, that is a tree view, a hierarchical view. And kind of going into this in a lot of details, really beyond the scope of this tutorial, but with tap script spins, you can spin by key or spin by policy. This first part here is spending by key, which we don't have, so instead we're going to spin by policy, which is our 2 of 2 multisig. This key is Frank's, and this key is Gary's. Then we have a list of our balances, the 4 different states of balances that we could potentially have on a policy. and then we have a deposit address. So what I'm going to do is copy this deposit address and go to the Bitcoin testnet faucet. You can see the web address here, testnet-faucet.com/BTC-testnet. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit. I'm going to paste it in, do the CAPTCHA. Send testnet Bitcoin. .085A, it looks like it sent us about 9,800. We'll come back, we'll take another look at the policy. And here, yep, we have our 9,800 sats sitting in untrusted pending. And so if we go back to our tutorial, our next step is going to be to generate a spend on this 9,800. We're going to send 1,000 sats back to the faucet that we just received them from. So the parameters for spending, which as you'll see is creating of a new proposal, new spend proposal. We have a number of different parameters. First is the name. That's the name of the proposal that that's the name of the key, the name of the user, the name of the keychain that we want. So it'll be Gary or Frank in this case. We have the policy ID. We have the to address of where we want to send the Bitcoin, again, back to the faucet. And then we have the amount and sats, followed by a memo. So you can see all of that here in this sample command. The only change that we're going to make is that we're going to change the policy ID from the one in the tutorial to the one that we have just created. So let's take a look and see if our sats have been confirmed yet. Okay, so now our sats are showing as confirmed. We could create our spend proposal. So I'm just going to copy the sample command and paste that in. And then I'm just going to erase the policy ID from the sample, copy and paste our policy ID in. And again, so what this is saying is using the testnet, we're going to propose a spend. Frank's going to propose a spend on this policy to send 1,000 sats back to the faucet to that address listed. And that gets created. Again, and we saw up top, we saw that a new event was created. That's the event that stored our proposal. So now let's take a look. The next command, let's take a look, get proposals. Again, it's kind of bunched up because of the way the screen's laid out here. Let's see if I can. It's going to be hard to see the way this video is set up, but you get the idea. It will output nicely for when you're in a proper screen resolution. So this has, for me, it has the ID, the row number. So if I had a long number of proposals, they would all show in this table. It gives me the ID, which is the event ID for this proposal. It also links to the policy, so I can cross-reference back to the policy ID that we're spending on. It shows the memo for this proposal, sending back to the faucet, the address where the funds are going to be going, and the amount of 1,000 sats. Again, over here on the left-hand side, you can see how that table looks. Okay, so now what we're going to do is approve it. Since it's a 2 of 2 multi-sig, we have to approve it both from Frank's account and from Gary's account. So the first thing I'm going to do is just copy, don't need to copy the proposal ID. Just going to copy in this first part that says we're going to approve from Frank, and then I'm going to copy the proposal ID, paste that in. And now if you notice, I didn't have the Coinstr password equals 1234 environment variable set at the beginning of this command. So it realizes that, and it prompts me to enter in that password. So I'll just put 1234, and then it says spending policy has now been approved. And that policy, you see the one starting, I'm sorry, the approval for this proposal is a new event, and that event begins 1700. That's the same one that was just inserted up here. So if you're familiar with Bitcoin and BIP 174, that is what's saved within there is the PSBT, or partially signed Bitcoin transaction, is saved within that event, Frank's side of it. So now we'll do the same thing, except let's approve from Gary. Same thing. D063E, D063E up here. Oh, you can't really see that because of the text is over it. But it's the same event. Okay, so now what we're doing is we have the policy that's created out there that's 2 of 2. We funded it with, almost 10,000 sats. We created a proposal to send back 1,000 sats, and we approved that from both Frank's account and Gary's account, and they created 2 separate events with those approvals sitting out there, sitting on Nostr. So what we're going to do now is broadcast that transaction. So what this command does is it goes to the proposal, which is this one, 043CF. It's going to go get that proposal. That proposal is going to go find all of the approvals that point to it, and it's going to merge them together, check that yes, that it meets all the criteria and it can be finalized, and if so, it will finalize that transaction and broadcast it to the Bitcoin testnet. So let's see if it works. I think I mentioned the proposal from the tutorial, not the one that we've been working on here, but I think you followed all of that. So here we go. Coinstr CLI, network testnet, broadcast from Gary's perspective. And we're going to go back and get our proposal ID, which is the one that begins CDE0F. Put that in. Again, we didn't have an environment variable, so it prompted us for the password. Transaction, broadcasted. It gives us a link here to the block explorer. So let's bring that over here. So of course it's unconfirmed, but you can see this is the address, MOHJ That's the one that we were sending to, the one that's listed here. We were sending 1,000 sats. That's what this is. Great. So let's review. What we did in this tutorial was pretend we were two different users, Frank and Gary. Frank created the 2 of 2 multisig policy. We reviewed it. We saw it in that hierarchical format where we could see the spin by key and spin by policy. Then that also generated a receiving or deposit address for us as well. We used that with the testnet faucet to put Bitcoin into our policy. Then once that was finalized, we created a spin proposal to send 1,000 sats back to the faucet. We created that from the perspective of Frank, but then we approved it both from Frank and Gary. And then Gary, once he realized he was, the second of the two to sign it, he broadcasted the transaction. And then we reviewed that on the testnet block explorer.